But anyhow, we're starting a new series on missional engagement. And we wanted to do 3 weeks of kind of thinking about what does it mean to be kind of this Christian term of being missional. That we're going to go out on a mission and try to engage with 3 areas. And today I'm going to talk more about how we engage with those who are in need. Next week is our anniversary service, so we won't be going to that. The week after, we'll be talking about, well, how do we deal with the needs or having this mission towards global missions? Like, what's our attitude and what's King's Cross stance on that? And we'll share a bit about that. And then finally, we'll talk about kind of our spheres of influence. How do we actually speak the gospel, become missions to people that are our co-workers, our family? So that's something that we can consider. But let's look at this passage, and there'll be 3 points today, essentially what the sermon will be about. It'll be about the separation, verses 31, 34, that God will judge and He will separate. The stranger, what our attitude towards stranger, verse 35 through 40. And then the source, we'll go back to 34 and 40, then 41 to 46. So we're going to kind of go back and forth just a little bit in the tag, and then we'll figure out this situation. Let's forget it. Even though I spent hours on it, it's okay. All right? Separation, 31, 34. And when the Son of Man comes in His glory, and all the angels with Him, then He will sit on His glorious throne. Before Him will be gathered all the nations, and He will separate people from one another, as shepherds separate the sheep from the goats. This is not a popular passage. It's one that speaks about judgment. Speaks about this idea of judgment. And if you've been around New York long enough, you've been around life long enough, you know what I'm talking about. You've heard Christians come up to you and speak about this idea of hell. It's not one of the things as Christians we're excited about. But in some ways we should talk about it. Why? Because Jesus spoke about hell more than any other topic in the 4 Gospels. He spoke about hell more than He talked about, like, a lot more than He talked about sex. Even though Christians, that's all we talk about. Or don't talk about as Asian Christians. Right? As we learn in my sermon series. The other aspect is, what's happening? Let's give Minnow an applause. This is going to be so much better. Where was I? He talked more about hell than actually his second most thing that he talked about was about greed and money. But he talked about hell. And let me just give you a little bit of background. This is a talk that he gave during the last week of his life. He's preparing to die. And there's this really amazing turn that in the midst of his preparation for his death, he declares himself. He says he is the Son of Man. And he's not simply just reporting on a singular event, but a vision of what is about to take place, which is judgment. And He's going to have all the nations gathered together. And it's not only Christians He's going to gather, He's going to gather everyone. And they will see. And part of us is to see ahead. Our faith in Jesus is not only about our current situation. As wonderful as Lois' testimony, she talked about her past, talked about the present. But the trajectory of our faith is looking ahead. And Jesus is kind of looking ahead. In all 3 ecumenical, most Christian creeds, their creeds are basically confessions we make. The Apostles, the Nicene, and Athanasian creeds all state that Christ will come to judge the living and the dead. And in this judgment of all people, there will be a separation. There will be sheep to His right, the goats to His left. Don't make it into a political thing. See? The Bible says, sheep on the right, goats to the left. Don't make it a political thing. And unfortunately, there's not a hybrid. There's not a goat sheep, a show, or a geek. It's just sheep and goat. And it's always moving ahead. When I was in seminary, we took a class, and there was this one section called what we call eschatology, the end times. When I took my licensure exam for our presbytery, I had to state my eschatological view. Is it A, premillennialism, post? Why do I believe postmillennialism? A, premillennialism? Do you know anybody know this? No, you don't. Because that's what we do. Seminaries and where we talk about this stuff. And we're so excited. I don't, but I pretend. Here's a picture that Jesus gives at the end times. And all this discussion, all this spin. And what do you think about rapture? What do you think tribulation? What do you think all that? At the end of the day, is it this picture? And I know it's a difficult teaching. Because hell is, we connote it with judgment. And when we connote it with judgment, we think it's about judging me and my value. But here it is, that God is going to judge us and diagnose our condition, our spiritual condition. And that's why this is an important teaching. This last year, there's a book that came out by Rob Bell, where he said, there's no such thing as hell, that everyone will be saved. So there's kind of one view, which is universalist, that says, loving God will never send anyone to hell, so everyone will be saved. And there's another group of people that are kind of a line called annihilationists. Not Lily, annihilationist, she's into annihilation. But that says, when you die, you know what happens? You know what happens when you die? You die. And nothing else happens. There's no this eternal trajectory. And I'm going to make a post today on why it is important to, this idea of the doctrine of hell is so incredibly important, because it gives us the magnitude of what the cross is. If there wasn't an eternal consequence, then the cross would be very, very insignificant. Because what he saved us from is incredibly important. Daniel 2 says this, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame, and some to everlasting contempt. And when you hear that, it's very scary. But here's this thing. Hell is something that I think is a reflection of how we live now. That this trajectory that we have towards eternity is something that is not just to judge you, to punish you, but to say, this is your heart condition now. That the way you look at life, the way you live life, is actually the way you're going to move towards the afterlife. C.S. Lewis has this great quote. Christianity asserts that we're all going on forever, and that must be either true or false. Now, there are a great many things that wouldn't be worth bothering about if we was only going to live, if you were only about to live 80 years or so. But I had better bother about it if I'm going to go on living forever. Perhaps my bad temper or my jealousy are getting worse so gradually that the increase in my lifetime will not be very noticeable. But it might be absolute hell in a million years. In fact, if Christianity is true, hell is precisely the correct technical term for it. And he continues. Hell begins with a grumbling mood, always complaining, always blaming others. But you're still distinct from it. You may even criticize it in yourself and wish you could stop it, but there may come a day when you can no longer. There will be no you left to criticize the mood or even to enjoy it. But just the grumble itself, going on and on forever like a machine. It is not a question of God sending us to hell, but in which each of us there is something growing, which will be hell unless it's nipped in the bud. Essentially he's saying, C.S. Lewis, very profound. He's saying that you're already on the way. That you're making a trajectory in the way you see yourself. And what is the problem? And what is the main issue? Tim Keller says this, that what happens in this kind of judgment day is a continuation of your self-centeredness, or our self-centeredness, our self-absorption. It's about me, rather than you. It's a move away from God towards ourselves. And then our soul disintegrates, our self-centeredness creates this disintegration of our souls. And we see ourselves as a self-absorption leads to piercing bitterness, nauseating envy, paralyzing anxiety, and paranoid thoughts, and the mental denials and distortions that accompany them. And this is what we're doing now. And upon Judgment Day, it's not as if, oh, I'm going to change now. Because Judgment Day is a day of union with Christ. And if you spend a lifetime saying, I don't want you, I don't need you, you're moving in that direction. And it's all about self-absorption. This passage, why this is so significant, and we're going to go on the third point a little bit later on, I'm going to unpack it a little bit, is that he's giving a picture of their hearts. He's saying that you're not feeding, you're not clothing, you're not giving drink, you're not doing all the things. Why? Why? And a lot of us will say, because I don't care, I don't have a burden for it. That's not why. You know why you don't have a burden for it? You know why we don't care? Because you care about yourself. He's saying that's your heart condition. That on that day of judgment, I'm judging you not because I didn't know, I didn't see. It's because, or that, oh, I didn't really know that was my call to help people. Or that was a commandment that I was supposed to do. He's saying essentially, you're going this direction and it's all about yourselves. Even when we present the gospel sometimes. I remember when I told you this story before. I used to run a summer camp with 200 kids. Non-Christian immigrants kids would come and we do a gospel presentation the last night always, right? You trick them. You have basketball games, you play with them, and they love you, and then you play, they do some classes, and then we do skits for them, they laugh, and this is awesome. The last night, we present hell. And what idiot kid, moron kid would go, if you don't accept Jesus Christ, you'll burn in hell forever. What kid would go, okay, I'll go to hell. Hell sounds pretty cool to me. They all say yes. And we thought, oh, this is awesome. See, we're preaching the gospel. We're preaching hell. And look at these kids, hundreds of kids coming to know Jesus. But here's the distinction in this passage. The reason why we're going to hell is not just because we haven't accepted Jesus. But again, it's this, even that thing about hell. Why are the kids accepting Jesus? They don't want to burn. It's for them. It's for their best self-interest. And it continually promotes what? More selfishness. They're not doing it because they want God, or because God is good. But they're really saying, I don't want to go to hell. Now here's my caveat. Every single one of these people in this room, including myself, and I bet even Lois to a certain extent, nobody came to God because they wanted God. In our nature, we don't want it. A lot of us come because of a friend, because of fellowship, because we're tired of being alone, we're tired of being in this situation that we're really tough, and we go to Him in desperation. And that's usually in the gospel, you see people going to Jesus, not because He's Messiah. They're going to Him because I have a sickness. They're going to Him because I have a servant that's dying. They're going to Him because my daughter is dying. And I need you. And that's an okay place to start, with desperation. But as you move towards devotion,